The question for today is people into caregiving, little dynamics. What do you find sexually arousing about being called daddy? I've been with my boyfriend for a year and he really likes being called daddy. And he calls me his little girl, little one, or sometimes pet. Recently, while having sex, he was encouraging me to say it a lot. And in that moment, observing his reactions, I realized just how much it turns him on. So what exactly makes the term daddy sexually arousing for people? Is it the taboo, the implied power dynamic? What is the root here of the very common trope here of daddy, mommy, kind of the labels in BDSM?
Sure. I think this is often one of the most poorly understood kinks. And what's interesting about it is that I think people have such a strong reaction to it, partly because there is depth to it. And what's interesting is it's cross-cultural even. So Spanish, for instance, you can call a little girl mija, which is daughter, but it's also something a husband can call a wife. It's a term of endearment that's commonly accepted there, which is my daughter, literally, like in translation.
Or papi.
Yeah, papi is another very common in Spanish, that framework. So why is it in a romantic and sexual relationship, there is some analogy that cross-culturally our minds are drawing to a father-daughter relationship? And one of the things that we struggle with here is that our politics and our sort of social dynamics have gotten out of touch with some of the biological issues and biological realities. So one of the aspects that I talk about in the book is the notion of the archetype of the wise king, which is also the father archetype. And the role of the father, in many ways, is to carve out a safe space. The role of the king is to establish a domain. The role of a father is to engage with the outside world in such a way that the home remains safe and to establish order within that home. So you look at older movies, wait until your father gets home, right? Because your father is the arbiter of justice. And that's the framework of, hey, mom can be loving and caring and warm and soft, but wait till your father gets home because then justice will be meted out. Because that's the establishment of order and rule and consistency. That's the archetypal view. And it is that order. I mean, if we had no laws and it was just anarchy, we would not flourish. And similarly in a home, without order and consistency and rule, children especially will not flourish. Now, one of the things that, again, politically incorrect, right? A beautiful entry into the political incorrectness of kink is that there is something childlike about women. And you can see that in any male interaction, the threat of violence is there. Is you push me too far, you're going to get punched in the face. And men always interact with each other with some subconscious awareness that is on the table. Now, that's not on the table for women. We're not going to punch them in the face. And we symbolize our commitment to that code with all of the chivalrous gestures. You open the door for the woman, you pull out her chair. All of these are symbols that I'm not treating you the way I treat a man. Because you're smaller, you're weaker, and thus you need to be protected. And so culturally, we agree that women and children first. Women and children need to be protected. They need to be conserved. There's a mimicry of biology there. Biology has a higher male mutation rate. Even genetically, the female line is protected. Now, all protection is a form of oppression. You can't have one without the other. And that, even in a romantic relationship, is going to manifest that the father-daughter-ness of protection, establishment of rules, establishment of order, and protection, caretaking, a caretaking protection is going to be established. And I do think if you met a man who was unwilling to acknowledge your right to punch him in the face if he pushed far enough, you would lose respect for that man. You would have less respect for a man who insists on unequal treatment, who says, no, I'm a vegan. I can't, I do yoga. I don't know how to fight. I'm not on the table here. So I don't want to engage this way. You lose respect for that person because they're insisting on special treatment and they're not playing the game the way everyone else is playing the game. They're not really saying, hey, I'm willing to risk it all to stand for my beliefs, so on and so forth. That's an extreme example, but for the same reason, I do think that women are one step down on the sort of social respect hierarchy, and we feel that. Many people will figure out that, oh, that's wrong, and you shouldn't say. Look, men would not be humiliated if their dominant mistress forced them to dress like a woman if there wasn't a loss of respect as a result. That kink of sissification that men engage in hinges on the notion, like if you tell a woman, hey, go wear blue jeans and a t-shirt, or go wear my button-down shirt, there's no humiliation there. Now, if you tell a woman, I want you to go dress like a little schoolgirl, or I want to put you in a dog outfit and put a butt plug tail in your ass, now there is, because the hierarchy goes men, women, children, pets, objects. That's the hierarchy. And so pushing someone down on that hierarchy will trigger emotions of humiliation. And it hinges on our subconscious recognition that there is this hierarchy. Now, getting back to the question, when a girl calls a man daddy, she is playing into that archetype. She is saying, I recognize that there's love here, but I also recognize and affection and caretaking and protection. But I recognize also that that means you're an authority in my life, that you set rules for me, that you enforce those rules, and that if I've disobeyed them, then I'm worried about what happens when daddy gets home. Now, that's the explicitly kinky version, but I think all the shades of those emotions are there, even in these cross-cultural kind of casual references of papi or mija or whatever the deal is these same archetypal, subconscious, emotional tropes are still being activated because when you meet a woman, punching her is not in the face is not on the table, and you're not treating her equally to a man. And we lose respect for men who don't play by those rules. If you see a video of a man punching a woman in the face, you're like, what the hell are you doing? You're treating a woman like a man. That's not okay either. So enforcing that hierarchy, I think, is very important. And that awareness of that hierarchy is what creates the naturalness of calling your partner daddy or him calling you little girl.
Term you use, the naturalness of calling your partner daddy. We've seen people of older generations who are whatever in their 80s or whatever, and they married for some god number long amount of years. And then you will every now and then hear the woman called the man daddy. And whenever I've seen this happen, we all sort of Twitter. I'm like, oh, yeah, isn't that funny? But it's natural for them because they're sort of coming from an age where those sort of gender roles, that here's the man, he's the guy who's supposed to be the provider and the protector, and then the woman has a role that's different to that, and there's almost a dependence of the woman on the man. That was the stereotypical gender roles, and then of course comes along the industrial age, and women can also work, and then these roles get very confused. And perhaps also the idea of why you would call your dominant daddy as a woman, why is that at all an instinct? Right. That wisdom becomes lost on us. And why does it
feel so good?
Yeah, why does it feel... It becomes lost on us, right? Because we're sort of enmeshed in this industrial age where these gender roles are becoming very mixed.
What's interesting, too, is that as we become in this more industrial age, in this more sort of socially egalitarian age between men and women, these are pushed into the subconscious, into the shadow. And so there is less and less non-sexual opportunity to call your partner daddy because it's been pushed into the shadow. It's not acceptable socially outwardly, and thus it goes into the same place that goes when you want to fuck your partner, where that's also not something you do in public. And now calling daddy is also not something you do in public because it used to be. It used to be just the norm. And there wasn't as much of a sexual aspect to it. It was just an acknowledgement of his authority that was, in fact, the reality. And now, because that's become socially suppressed, your persona can't inhabit that. And now it's in the shadow, the psychological shadow, and it comes out sexually and in all these other different ways.
It reminds me of this throwaway line from The Godfather. I know me and you have talked about this more than once before, but it's when Vito Corleone turns to Michael in the garden, of all places, as they're preparing for what's about to happen next. And Vito tells Michael is that men cannot be careless. Women and children can be careless, yes, but not men. And that was just an encapsulation of what was expected of a man right back then.
And the scene matters. So it's actually not accidental that they're in the garden. because he carved out that garden from the world. And the women and children are playing in it and being safe and being careless. They don't care what violence is about to happen, who's doing what, who's going to get shot. They don't have to care because he is there to carve it out. And that's the role of a man, is to say, I'm going to deal with all the violence and the shit and the blood and carve out this garden, and you can just go play. And that's the wise king.